Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Inclusion Starts Now podcast. Today, I am interviewing my friend Matt. We met about a year ago, and now we have continued to start. We've started working together, and we seem to continue to working together. We've both been in education since about 2010, and we are in two completely different spaces in the education realm, but working together has been so nice because I've been able to focus more on transition for students with disabilities after high school, as that is what Matt does. He works kind of in that college. He like helps tutor, he helps kids get ready for college. And even though his specific focus isn't always students with disabilities, because of us partnering together, he's now also been focusing on that. So here is a great conversation that you are about to enjoy with Matt and me and Matt, Matt and I. I don't know why I can never get that right. Also, this episode this week is sponsored by my mom. Why is it sponsored by my mom? Because she is downstairs watching both of my children as I edit and record this part of the podcast and schedule all of them. So we can all thank my mom. Thanks for listening. I am here today with my friend, best friend, and business partner, Matt McGee. And Matt, would you like to introduce yourself to the millions
Sure.
of listeners?
Yeah, I'm excited to have just been upgraded to best friend. Um,
I probably use that term a little too liberally. I will admit.
I think I'm going to hold you to it now. I am Matt McGee. I am, in addition to being Kayla's best friend, for many, many, many years. I am, I am also a college admission specialist, and I run a tutoring company, which both of those focus on students with neurodivergences, students with disabilities, among neurotypical students as well. So we kind of work across the gamut there.
Awesome. And I would really like to start this beautiful interview off with you sharing your story about how you kind of got into this job and started focusing on like students with disabilities.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I feel like the story is so telling about like why we need inclusion consultants and whatnot. But so I was working as a private tutor for a company, and they would send students out. They would be like, or they would send like students out to tutors to be like, do you want this? Right. So as an English and a history tutor, I would get students 11th grade boy who has, who loves school, but he's maybe not up on his homework, loves to talk about X, Y, and Z. Do you want to work with him? Tell us why you'd be a good fit. And, I'd be like, great. Yeah, he sounds like a great student, yada, yada, yada. I would love to work with him. And then they'd match it if it worked out. So one day I get these two requests, and the requests are pretty simple. One is for like a 10-year-old girl who is doing homeschool, and she needs a history class, but the parents want it to be highly specialized. And the other student is a 14-year-old student who is also being homeschooled. He wants history, but also needs someone who can take government and politics. So I was like, great. Wrote my little blurb, thought this is going to be fantastic, matched with them, wonderful. And now it was time to have the conversation with the parents of, this is going to be the scheduling. Tell me more about your student. And so I met with the girl's parents first. And what I found out was that uh, she had a physical disability, but she also was in regular school and had been pulled out of regular school because I don't know if it was a bullying situation or whatnot, but there was some sort of anxiety surrounding her physical disability that was so crippling that she had completely stopped speaking to anyone
Whoa.
in school. So
No,
they
so
had
by regular, do you mean like the general ed classroom, or was she in like a special ed classroom at a public school?
No, she had done several schools actually. So I believe she
Okay.
was in school. They had moved her to a private school. As far as I know, she was always in the general ed classroom. But like wouldn't do things so far as you'd be like, "Hey, will you take your book out?" And she would just look at you. Right. So it was that type
Yeah.
of. And And I was like, oh, okay. I guess we're
And wait,
gonna.
I'm sorry, you're saying that she was doing that. I feel like I'm getting so much more details on this story right now, which I appreciate. But are you saying that she kind of like shut down after all this bullying? Like, was she able to do those like tasks before, or was?
She was in school for,
Hmm.
first, second, third. I think I got to her in fourth or fifth grade. So she was in school all that while. As I understand it, her physical disability was related to puberty. Um,
Mhm.
and so I think it sort of started to come on. And again, I don't necessarily know that it was bullying that was causing it, or if it was internal, combination of both, whatever it was. But yes, my understanding was that she was fine for all of these years. And then as it started to come on, that's when they were starting to troubleshoot for it. And I know that they were like 6 months to a year in of switching schools, working with the learning specialists at schools, and like not able to do it. So that's why they went with a completely like homeschooled online option. She wouldn't even have people in person or anything like that. Um, and I thought like, well, okay, so that was the first student. The second student, I called that parent and found out that he was autistic, and that they had pulled him out of school because they, like the other parents, had tried a number of situations, but essentially discovered that he was having panic attacks whenever he was in class, right? So he was basically all day having a panic attack. He was sitting there and
Yeah.
his heart was like 150. And so they were
Oh
like,
my gosh.
we have to get him out of school. And he presented very similarly with like the way that a lot of autistic people do. He had very rigid beliefs. He was very interested in what he was interested in. And if things didn't go well, he could kind of like shut down and you had to then troubleshoot for that. And I was sitting there thinking like, why was I contacted for these students? Because I have no background in working with these students. I don't know anything about special education. I've never worked with a student with special needs. I don't know how I got these people. Uh, and I remember sitting there and having that message like typed out to the tutoring company, but then realizing like I can't pass up the money that's going to come with this because when you're like tutoring with a company like that, you're making like $25 an hour, right? So you're like, I
Rolling
need
in
it.
it.
Yeah, exactly, right? These families are paying like $200 an hour and they're like, great, let's pay the teacher like 25 bucks. And you're like, okay, so that's another, if these kids are going to go to school 3 days a week and I get them, like that's another 250 to 300 bucks a week. Great. Yeah, I could use that. And so ultimately, probably against my better judgment, I was like, yeah, great. We will do this. We're gonna give it the old college try.
Uh,
Um, and from those experiences, which I mean, I can get into further detail if you want to hear how those went. It led me down the path of kind of like realizing what students with disabilities, neurodivergent students, are facing and the kind of support that they get. Realizing that if you were throwing me in with what I knew at the time, that they were not getting sufficient support. Um, and and then kind of being like, oh, I think that there's a space for that. I think that there's a place where we can kind of address that and moving toward that.
I'm gonna probably have a lot of questions based off of your time with these kids because I want to know as like you had training like to tutor children, but they don't always tutor you to to tutor children with disabilities. So what was like a different practice that you had to have to be able to like tutor them successfully?
Like everything. That's the like the first thing that jumps off. So they were very two different cases. One, the girl and I got off to a very rocky start. Um, Ultimately, I was very successful with her. The guy and I, the older kid, got off to a really good start, but ultimately I wasn't successful with him. When you're in the tutoring space and you're like used to dealing one-on-one, because I was never somebody who was in the classroom, you're used to like kind of having a rapport with the student, right? Like that's kind of the first thing you have to do. Whereas if you're 20 to 1, you're kind of like, let's just follow the curriculum as much as we can. So I was always pretty good
I was going
As
to say for teachers, you should try to still have a good trusted relationship with your students. But yes, you are correct that it is much harder when there are 20 students in the classroom and you're trying to
as
form
someone who has
a relationship with
as some
all.
yeah, I mean, as someone who's like pushed into classrooms and seen teachers trying to do like 25, 30 students at a time, you're like, it's near impossible. Like I one-on-one struggle to build rapport with certain students. And I'm like, I don't know how you do it with 25 kids who are all in like different places and like bouncing off the walls and it's just to me, I'm like, that's an impossible task.
Well,
Uh,
I actually think the one-on-one tutoring is harder because you're dealing with like that person the entire time. So like, because I've done some tutoring too, and it's like, I don't know, when you want a break or if they're having a hard time and like they want to like, maybe they need like some space to do their own thing. Like that's what I liked about the classroom that you like come in and you check in and then you're like, okay, like you're gonna keep working on that. I'm gonna go over here. Like you get really used to floating. And I feel like I even do that with my own kids. Because when I was a one-on-one tutor, I felt like those hours were so long. I was like, this is so much attention and work to be doing this for a whole hour or however long you're tutoring.
I think it can be because I remember my first days tutoring and thinking that as well too, where you're like, I have to lesson plan for an hour. And then the way I sort of adapted, and this was how I was really successful with the girl, was that I got to a place where I was like, oh, wait. We cannot just be doing lesson plan, follow the curriculum. That can't be the method. The method has to be we are two people together having a conversation, learning about each other, and really just sort of um, existing as two friends would. And I think if you're a skilled teacher, which I like to think of myself, right, you start to go, all right, I can have this conversation with this 10-year-old human in front of me, and I can guide it to the points that I want it to have, but it's gonna go into strange 10-year-old places. And you just kind of have to be like, cool with that. And I think that was one of the things that like I struggled with her at first because she would like talk to me about things and ask me about things that I was like, I don't fully know how to do this, but you start to kind of just adapt to it. And I got to a place with her where I think a lot of teachers will relate to this, right? She wanted to know everything personal. She wanted to know like, did I have a roommate? She wanted to know like what kind of like did I live in a house or an apartment? But she wanted to know all these personal things. And when you're a teacher, you have to like walk that line of like, how much am I going to let in to like keep
Yeah.
them there and how much is like unacceptable. And I had to do that with her to the point where it would be like 5 to 10 minutes of me telling her some like gossip from my life. And I would like 10-year-old it down. Um, but when I started to build that rapport, because like I said, when I started working with her, she was literally, you would ask her to take her book out and she would sit there and stare at you. And so I was here, I'm like this like mid 30s guy, trying to not scare this 10-year-old girl who's not going to take her book out. And so getting in that way through like, what's going on in your life? And I'm like, yeah, you're not going to believe what Ashley said to Jeremy last night. Right. And she's like, oh my God. Right. And then we do that for 5 minutes. And I remember the first time we were talking about it and I was telling her this story. And she was like, oh, okay. Well, I guess we should probably do some work now. And she pulls her book out and like we were off and running. um, and I was like, oh, that's it. And so to me, that's where it was an aha moment insofar as like being extremely adaptable to the student who is in front of you. And also to your point about like it being very like having to, it's so much focus, right? It's so much attention. And to the point of like, this is not particularly hard work. You and I know each other. You and I have a rapport, but we're still going to talk about the things that we have like scheduled to talk about, and we're still going to hit the points. And like to me, that's where like the beauty of one-on-one tutoring is, and where kids like her start to succeed in like the one-on-one model when they can't in like the 1-on-30 model or whatever it is, or even like a 1-on-12.
Yeah. So did either of these students ever go back to public school?
She's back in public school.
Oh, that's awesome. So did you help find like the appropriate accommodations or support that she needed to get back to school?
I didn't. I kind of continuously just like updated her parents, like this is where she is, this is how she's going. And I think it was actually funny because she was having difficulty with the other teachers. So like the Spanish teacher, I remember having an issue, but she started like everybody started using this method. It was like she's pretty good if you start to like talk a little bit about like what's going on in your life, then she feels
Yeah.
comfortable and like open up. Um, but like once we started to figure out that, she was able to start getting on top of her anxiety. And like her and I actually still have a relationship. She will like out of the blue, because she's like 14 or 15 now, she'll like FaceTime me and be like, hey, like I'm making cookies. Like, you want to make cookies? And I'll be like, yeah, sure, we can make cookies for 15 minutes, you know. Um, but no, I didn't ultimately have any say in like where they got placed. I think she just had to get on top of her anxiety um, to be able to get back into a space where she was comfortable dealing with like 25 people.
Yeah, I that is such both of those are such great examples of what I think I see a lot when there's like struggling with inclusive practices that students are, we don't see what internally is going on. And so we don't know. And then they have a behavior, and then everyone, they discipline or they yell, and, they're trying to be super strict with these kids that are trying to they're trying to communicate that they're like stressed out, they have anxiety, that maybe depression, like, we usually don't know all the stuff that is going on at their house, and all the internalized ableism that they could possibly be getting. I mean, if children already go through the system to get diagnosed, they have already gone through more doctor's appointments and assessments and therapies at such a young age. And I'm sure they're overhearing their parent and doctor have the conversation of like, well, they're pretty behind, but we're gonna keep trying to do this. Like, why maybe we should up these minutes. Like, that cannot be like healthy to keep hearing over and over again. So it sounds like your relationship, well, I guess with one of them was really successful. So what happened with the other one?
The other one, we started out very strong because one of the things that I think I find most difficult, and one of the reasons why I struggled with her out of the gate, is that like students who are engaged are very easy for me, right? If you think about what I just kind of like talked about, you're like, great, if we can have this conversation, we're good. But if every time I say something, if you don't play the game with me, then, it goes out the window. So he was very engaged from the start. And so that made it easy to have these conversations. But the trouble that I ran into was when you're teaching history to an autistic student, at least the way I look at teaching history and politics and government, you need to be very careful about like not teaching the what, but more teaching the how. And what I mean by that is that I think you turn people off when you teach history, so far as in 1900, this happened. And then in 1910, this happened, right? And people like glaze over. Like you can talk to a dork like me, and I'm like, and then what happened in 1920, you know? But but most people are like, I don't want to do that. And so I think the value of
I
history,
am with most people.
of course you are. Um, um, but so like the value of teaching history in that way, I think is an understanding of knowing what happened and then what we think about that, why we think things about that, and like how that can apply to what's happening now. Right. And so when you're dealing with someone who is autistic, who has particularly strong feelings about that, the why and the how get shut down very quickly, right? Because their beliefs are already in place. And when it's my job to challenge your beliefs, whatever they may be, it can get into an escalated situation very quickly. And this is where you need people who are trained to deal with this. You need people who know how to de escalate that situation. I remember working with the family had a therapist, a psychiatrist. I don't remember exactly what her title was. And she would try and give me kind of like tips and tricks to work with him. But ultimately, I didn't have it in my wheelhouse to be able to kind of like have the productive conversations that we needed to have. And so ultimately, we found someone else for him that was able to kind of do that. Um, but yeah, I think it speaks again to the fact that like when the family came to the company that they found us through, that company should have had the conversation to say like, what kind of person do we need? Can we talk about this student's proclivities? Can we talk about his tendencies? Can we talk about where his hangups are so that we find somebody who's going to be able to deal with that? And I think that's very difficult in a $25 an hour model because you're hiring whoever will take the job at that point, right? And you're just kind of going like, hey, you need a history teacher? Let's find you a history teacher. You know, like this guy teaches history. Um,
Did he have an
because
IEP?
he did.
Did you get to look at it at all?
Not the like formal IEP. Like I would get like messages from the parents of like these are the things that you need to hit in the lesson.
Oh yeah, that wouldn't because in the IEP there's portions where it says like what kind of accommodations the student needs, what kind of like support helps them, be more
Sure.
successful. So I feel like that information would have been really helpful to you and you did not get it, I'm
I
assuming.
think that information would have been helpful to the company, right? So like if the company, you know, whoever takes does the intake, the learning specialist or whatever it is, they should have had that information to know this is the kind of support he's going to need. Because I would get messages I would get messages from the mom, which sort of addressed some of those things. And it wasn't like what he was dealing with was an unknown to me. It was more just that I wasn't necessarily trained or the person to be able to work with him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I mean, I've probably said this on like 50% of my podcast episodes that the training I have received in the most specialized program that I was in, which was focusing on students who are deaf-blind, I felt like so many of those techniques would be helpful for like all special education teachers to learn
Mhm.
but I also feel like so many of the things I learned as a special education teacher would be so helpful for teachers to learn. And then I just feel like so much of all of that information would be really beneficial for like parents to know or anybody who just like talks to a child.
Yeah.
Um, but I definitely learned some things that I mean, I do with my own two children who, as of now, don't have a disability. So it's interesting to me that it gets so focused onto like certain disabilities or I don't know, because like with teachers, especially general ed teachers, they are running into so many students who could be like on the spectrum or could just have like a milder form of a disability, but those are the teachers that are like the first ones to see them. And if they don't like have any sort of background information on that, they're coming into it like, why is this child not listening? Like, why are they misbehaving? And then they just start getting stricter instead of like actually finding a way to get them interested in like what they're learning or finding support that they need.
The amount of that happens is absolutely bananas because I mean, I remember working with a student um, came to us, needed help with history, and talking to the mom, and she's like, if you could help him with his handwriting, that would be really helpful as well. So I said, okay, I will let the tutor know. So the tutor goes off and they're working on history, whatnot, and they're working on the handwriting and everything like that. And so we're communicating, and it comes out that the kid had and I don't know the ins and outs of CP, but had a very mild form of CP, which
Yeah.
if I'm getting this correctly, was like increasingly more mild the older he got.
Increasingly more mild, like it
So
was
it
going away.
decreased it. Like, yeah, that's what was being expressed to me. I don't
You
want
know
to say
what? So
that
do you
could be
know sorry, do you know about cerebral palsy?
very, very minimal.
I mean, I could say I wouldn't even say I'm like the specialist on CP. I've worked mostly with the deaf-blind population, autistic students, or like other health impairments where it's like been a lot of medical needs. But, well, which cerebral palsy can fall into. But cerebral palsy is because of something happening during birth or during late delivery that they either like get too much oxygen or not enough oxygen. And it like affects the way that the brain is developing. And so it's like the brain isn't able to make all the connections to the rest of the body and tell it what to do. But there is a huge spectrum. Some people who are diagnosed with cerebral palsy could be walking and talking and just have like a minor disability, where some people with cerebral palsy are like use a wheelchair as like their primary source of
Transportation. Yeah, how they
thank
get
you
around.
like of yeah
Yeah.
getting around and might take longer to like form sentences or so it is. I mean, and actually I wanted to say this at the beginning when you were I can't remember what you said, but it's like a quote that's really big in the disabled world, probably more with caregivers. I'm actually not sure. Maybe everyone. It's saying like when you meet one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And it's like that with all disabilities. It's like you meet one person with cerebral palsy, you've met one person with cerebral palsy. Like, yeah, of course, there's going to be people who have similarities, but like every person is so different and unique in their own way that it's like we shouldn't just be like, oh, you're autistic. Well, let me do it this way. Cause like and I feel like a lot of the teaching model is trying to change into this like child-led teaching and it's kind of like what you did with that little girl of like, she needed to hear that like you were a person and had a life outside of her to be able to like connect with you and like want to do the work and like be motivated. And so then all of like you and all the teachers started doing that. You all found the way to like get her motivated and connect with her, um, which is all a great example of child-led teaching. So congratulations, you get the badge of honor for child-led teaching without even knowing it.
I will expect a pin or a ribbon in the mail.
We recently just did a webinar together about IEPs to college. Is that what we called it?
We called it supporting students with IEPs on the graduation track to college with an
No,
IEP
no,
student.
no, that's
Student
wrong.
supporting graduation track, college, IEP. Those are like the keywords. So for
Okay.
anybody listening, want to search Google for it, I don't think you'll find it, but those would be the keywords.
Well, you wouldn't find it because you had to basically give us your email to get the link. So if anyone's listening and you want the link, give us your information. Or just
Well,
join us on our Facebook group, which we'll talk about at the end. But I'm totally getting off topic.
it's a lot better than our description of it. The webinar is actually useful. Our description of it was useless.
I think the webinar is so good, and I think it is such an important topic because so many people, especially parents so many parents who get a diagnosis for a disability with their child, struggle with a lot of obviously the ableism all around us. And then they start not really knowing what their child is going to be able to do someday. And a lot of it starts, in the medical system and at school. And one of the things I always did as a teacher was I would always mark their IEP, like there was a little checkbox to say that they were on graduation track. Even if they were like in first grade, I did not care. I would always put it on because I wanted everyone to have that mindset that we all want to try to find the best way for the student to succeed. And you actually have stories of disabled students who went to college and basically like used their disability to their advantage. And I would like you to talk about that now. Thank you.
Is there a question in there, Kayla?
No, I am a professional podcast interviewer.
um, Kayla just likes to prompt people. Um,
That is true. That is true.
yeah, no, it's crazy. You talk about the ableism and like, I don't see it as much. I see like the results of it where like I get these students and parents who are like, I didn't know I could go to college. Somebody told me that it was a possibility, but like I didn't know. So we came to you because you're the person that does that. Uh, and what I see is that like I'm like, yeah, you know what? If you were told, if you had a kid or you were the kid, right? And from age like 2, you and your family were told like, no, you can't do that. Like, yeah, you probably won't be able to play that sport. You're probably not going to be able to be in that classroom. Like, we would love to have you in that activity, but like, I don't know if it's gonna, right? Like, eventually you would stop asking and you would start internalizing
Mhm.
what you were being told, right? And so that's when I was like, oh, that's why I get all these people who are like, can I go to college? And I'm because to me, I'm like, yeah, you go to college. I almost like I have like an offensive thought in my head where I'm like, yeah, that's stupid. Like, of course you can go to college. But then I think about it and I'm like, yeah, well, of course, if you were told no, 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 no for 18 years, 10 years, whatever it is, you would obviously internalize that.
And wasn't
Um,
it kind of an expectation for you to like
what'd
go
you
to
say?
college? Wasn't it an expectation
Oh,
for you to like go to college?
yeah, yeah, it was. And to me, I look at these students who come and they have uh ADHD or they're, 2E or they have a physical disability and I go like, yeah, there's no reason you can't be at college. Like
Yeah.
yeah, there's going to be some things that are different, you know what I mean? But like you could go. Like
Yeah.
in fact, and the big thing I think that, one of the things that we talked about on the webinar was that like they want you there, not like in spite of, but because of either your disability or your neurodivergence, right? And to me, it always sounds a little bit like too business-like to talk about it or like results oriented. But like they want diversity. They want people with different experiences. They want people who are different because every kid has like 10 years of the cello and like is the captain of the math club and like has volunteered at a soup kitchen and has a 4.0 and a 1600 and they're like great, we will take one of you, right? And you're like people are out here dying to find something different and I'm like you have it, right? You have this thing that makes you so different and it's been a disadvantage because people tell you you can't do things like let's turn that and make that an advantage for once. um but yeah, I think, I mean, on the webinar, I think I talked about, um did I talk about the student who discovered the fish,
Yes, you did. One of my
right?
favorite stories.
Where you're looking at a student who is autistic and struggles with like social interactions. He can go down a rabbit hole very easily. He can forget things very easily. You can be having a conversation with him, tell him something, and you'll be like, "So we're going to work on X, Y, and Z," and he'll be like, "Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. Which letters are we working on?" Right? And like, it happens at that kind of speed. But he loved to be outdoors. He loved nature. He lives up in Sonoma County, so he had all this like space that he could go out and be out in space, and he would do that stuff. And so obviously he got into like environmentalism and like land management, agriculture stuff, and he's doing as a 15-year-old, like he's monitoring the health of the rivers near his house, right? And you're like, who who does that, right? But he's just doing it for fun. You're like, there are people who you couldn't pay to do this, and he's just out there checking pH levels and cleaning up trash and being like, is the health of the creek okay? Because it affects the entire ecosystem.
It does.
Um, and this is the part of the story where I struggled to tell it because I don't know what he knows. But essentially, he sees that there is this trout which is in this stream, and he's like, "Well, these trout haven't been there since the Industrial Revolution, and trout are supposed to go to the ocean, and if they don't go to the ocean, they're actually a different. It becomes like a different species of fish." And so he realized that the stream that they were in, there was no way that these trout could get to this stream or could get to the ocean. Like it was just physically impossible. And so he was like, this is like we have to contact someone about this. And so he contacted a local like wildlife, they were biologists, had them come out and they were like, yeah, man, this is a new species of fish. So from there, we took it and we were like, great, independent study. Let's work with the biologist. We'll do a research project, all from his intense interest in the protecting the health of the river and being out in wildlife and agriculture and whatnot. And he got into Berkeley on that, right? He got into a couple of other schools as well, but like that's the type of stuff that you're talking about where you're like,
Like people
that's
don't think that it'll help. But I mean, and actually, this is another example of child-led teaching that, we saw the student's interest, or you saw the student's interest and used it to their advantage. And which I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like that's what colleges want. Like they want to see the individual uniqueness that you're bringing to something. And I feel like there's so many times where people who are neurodivergent, they're like, these are the social norms, these are the boxes to fit in, you should do it like this, instead of like embracing their differences and being like, great, you're into that. Let's see if anyone else is into that. Like, or how we can connect it,
absolutely.
whatever.
Absolutely. Like if I could give like one piece of advice to the people listening, I'd be like, forget about the boxes. Like the boxes cannot help you. They can probably help you in certain aspects of life when you need to be in a box at times and like maybe try and fit in that box. I can't tell you when, if maybe at soccer practice you should fit into the box. But like when it comes to college, to forget about the box. Like leave the box, break the box, break the box down and put it in the trash. You know what I mean? And it's like it's so interesting to me that you're talking now about like student-led education, student-led teaching. What was your
Yeah.
term?
I think
Uh,
student-led teaching.
student-led teaching. Student-led education sounds more
Okay.
professional.
Well,
Um,
this is my podcast. Go make your own.
um, uh, but to this idea of like things being student led, where I'm like, why is that even a thing just in the special education community? Because when when we work with a student, especially if they're applying to college, to me, the thing about like standing out is like, all right, so like where are you as far as like a passion? Like, what are you interested in? This was a student who we worked with who is not neurodiverse, but she was very much like, I'm into fashion. And she was very much the student that you would expect. She was the stereotype of the person you would expect who was into fashion and design. And her parents were like, we don't know what we're going to do because like she had very good grades. She was a very good student. She was interested and engaged, but she just like really liked fashion and that was what she did. And her parents were like, what are we going to do with this? Like, she's not going to go be a fashion major. But she started a YouTube channel her freshman year of high school, right? And so it starts out with like 10, 15 people following it or whatever. But like it started to slowly like her like the kids in the school found out about it. And then so they like went to her for fashion advice, right? So then more
Uh,
people discovered it. So then we were like, hey, like, maybe do a fashion show. So she did a fashion show. We got it covered by the local paper. And you're like, this all, and eventually, so she applied to Penn, got into Penn, and by the end of her senior year, it had like 50,000 followers or something like that, right? She's not going into fashion. I forget what she's majoring in, but she's not going into
I
fashion. And
mean,
I'm
it
like,
sounds like business. I was gonna say like, I don't know, business or
Penn doesn't,
event
they don't have, I
organizing or something.
think it was econ because Penn doesn't have a business school. The point was though that like people think that there is like no space for their interests, right? And we talked about this with the webinar when we were like, hey, what if we do with a kid who really likes throwing? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Great. So like there is something there. If you can take fashion and design, turn it into a YouTube channel and get into an Ivy League school with that, there is
There's
so much
something.
room. Forget about the boxes. That's the whole point of that story. It's a very long story to say forget about the boxes.
Well, it worked out because that's kind of a question that I've been starting to ask people at the end of our interviews is what kind of advice do you have for people? So you've already done it. You don't get another one. Sorry, got to be
Wow.
super tough. No, I'm kidding. Do you have another one?
If I had one piece of advice, um, and I don't get to say break down the boxes, you really screwed me here, Caleb. I think the thing I would say is, especially for like neurodivergent students with disabilities, families that are surrounding that, is just do not take no for an answer, right? Because it seems as though everywhere you go, you get told no, you get told you can't, you get told we can't do that, even when you know that you can do that. We have students all the time who will play, they'll go to college, they'll get all these accommodations, and then the professors are like, yeah, no, you can't do that. And the student doesn't necessarily have the wherewithal, but like we have the wherewithal to go in there and be like, actually, this is what you have to do. So understand that like you're going to hit these boundaries and they're going to be institutional boundaries, whether they're the school, whether they're other organizations, whether it's a tutoring company who you're like, yeah, I have special needs. And they're like, great, we're going to give you this guy. Whatever it is, know that like if you keep advocating for yourself and you keep looking, and I know it's exhausting and I know neurotypical and students without disabilities don't have to deal with it, but if you can keep doing that, look for the support groups, find the people like Kayla, you will get the answer that you need, you will get the accommodations that you need, and you can do so much more than what everyone else is telling you that you can't do.
Dude, snap, snap, abolish ableism. That's what I heard with all that.
Hashtag.
Well, I absolutely loved that both of those pieces of advice. Now, Mystic Cat's tarot card thing at my local bookstore, which I sold some of my books at.
This
And
episode was shot on Friday the 13th, so doing tarot and spooky stuff on yeah.
that's that makes this even cooler. But I'm gonna
Oh,
do this
there's a
with a
black
very
cat
guest
on.
thing.
Okay, I'll stop talking.
Do you want to pull up your cat while I do this?
My cat would be terrified. She wants no part.
Oh my gosh, I totally forgot it was Friday the 13th. Now this kind of feels like whatever you ask it is going to be
Am
really
I gonna
crazy.
get the death card?
There's no death cards. It's a cat one. This is a fun one.
I
But pretty
thought
much I sold my books to this a local bookstore, and basically she gave me cash, and then I was like, and I will take this. And then gave her most of the money back. Best purchase
so.
of my life.
So we're selling books for tarot cards. Cool. We're setting a really great educational standard here.
All business, man. It's all business. Okay. So
We
I'm
do
gonna
not
shelf it.
advise this to the parents at home. Keep the books, leave the tarot cards at the store.
Dude, I've been wanting, these are so freaking cute. You're hopefully gonna love it unless you get a really bad reading. Okay. I'm not sure how I'm gonna do this on here. How about this? Tell me when to stop.
Stop.
Okay. Let's see. It is, wait. Oh, it's facing the right way. You got the judgment card. Now here's the
That-
fun thing. I have to go look through my book and tell you what it says. Okay, you got judgment. The book says, and it was upright. So it's judgment awakening, is what it says. The little snacks are here to be considered by their furry overlord. It is time for them to be judged by him and join him, possibly in his belly, is in parentheses. Now is the time for self-reflection. Evaluate your new findings and make that big decision. Awaken your new, better self. Oh, that's such a cute one. So I got go eat snacks and then improve yourself.
Yes, in that order. You'll be happier if you eat the snacks.
Do you have any big choices coming up in your life?
Well, no, but I did just get promoted to best friend.
True. It's right. Tarot cards never lie. Thank you, Matt, so much for being with me on here and continuing to work together. And oh, I guess anybody listening, we should
Plug
talk to
our
the Facebook group.
plug our Facebook group, Kayla.
Would you
Come
like to
on.
talk about it?
Kayla and I have a Facebook group. It's called the Inclusive Learning Collective. Uh,
Got that name one, right?
we know more than just the keywords for that. Um, it is on Facebook. We have all sorts of resources on there. We try and post one or two a week that kind of blend in with the theme of what's going on right now. So you might go on there and currently you might see stuff about back to school or college applications because that type of stuff is coming up. Kayla likes to post a lot more of the technical stuff since she is aware on that side. But it's also just a community for people to kind of share their experiences, let sounding board, advice, everything like that. And it's really awesome.
Best Facebook group. Well, I would say second best because buy nothing will always have my heart. I have a huge problem with that, but on a different story. Best educational Facebook group ever.
She's not lying. She's not lying.
Well, thank you, Matt. Oh, and again, sorry. I mean, how can people contact you if they want to reach out to you?
Oh, for sure. You can find me on Instagram. We are at MRM Education. I also have like my own personal page, which is at Matt McGee _ed consulting. And I also have a new free resource of my own, which is also a Facebook group called Free College Admission Support with Matt
Ooh,
McGee. And so everybody, you can come on there, ask any question you want. It's basically an attempt at trying to give college advice to people who can't necessarily afford it. So come on into that group. Again, we're posting like college advice. We go live, answer questions, edit essays, do fun stuff like that. And that is the best way to get in touch with us.
that's awesome. I'll also make sure to put all that in the show notes because I am official. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in this week. And if you have any comments or questions, don't be shy and leave it below. All the links we talk about are in the show notes. And have a great day. Inclusion starts with you, and we just want to help. Bye.